switch their mobile phones and laptops to silent. Water is provided and will be refilled during the day, so please don't bring food or hot drinks into the room. Toilets are located in the basement, which is sort of the lifts at the far corner of the building in that direction out that way. I don't think there are any fire alarm tests planned for today. No, so if the alarm does go off, we will need to evacuate the building in an orderly fashion, following the green exit signs either through those doors or these doors. And then outside the building, and I think on one of the former tennis courts, is where we should muster. Ian, the programme officer, is around today, so if you've got any queries about logistics, etc., please have a word with him. So an agenda for this session was published last week, and this includes, in addition to the original issues that were on the agenda under matters part 2 and part 3 of matter 6, there are a number of other detailed issues that we'll pick up on, which basically are the council's response to a number of action points that I asked them to deal with earlier in the examination. Some of them are relevant to the areas of the district anyway that we're talking about today. So hopefully that'll be clear enough as from the agenda. I'll say just a brief word about some of those in a minute. So we've got all day to deal with the sites, the allocation, the non-strategic allocations in the eastern area and the AONB. I did put on the agenda that we'll deal with the sites in the AONB not before 2 o'clock. I suspect we may well finish this morning before 1 o'clock, but if that's the sort of natural break that we'd have. So I would expect to be starting again this afternoon at 2 o'clock for those that are interested in the AONB sites. And we've got until about 5 o'clock, although I suspect we won't need all afternoon to deal with the issues on the agenda for later today. Just a reminder, I'm sure you're all familiar now, that the purpose of the examination is to help me to decide if the plan submitted in March 2023 is legally compliant and sound, and if not, how it could be modified to ensure that it is. So this session, like the others, will take the form of a structured discussion of the issues on the agenda, and I'll start with some questions to the council and then open it up to see if others have got any contributions about those before we move on to the next agenda item. When you do wish to speak, if you could put your nameplate vertically, and then I will bring you in at an appropriate time. And then when I do ask you to speak, if you could make sure you've got a microphone that's the right sort of height and pointing in your direction so that it picks up your voice clearly enough. You might need to move the microphone slightly nearer to you rather than on the edge of the desk. And I'll give the council an opportunity if they wish to say any final comments before we move on to the next agenda item. The council, as is normal, has published some proposed main modifications to the plan at various times during the examination, and a comprehensive schedule of the modifications that had been proposed up until the start of the hearings was published on the 2nd of May. That was a document exam 23. So that's a schedule that had them all in relevant to that time. So that's still relevant, and some of the sites that we're talking about today have got some modifications that are set out in that schedule. There have been some further works since the hearing session started, so there are some further modifications that the council has submitted now, and some of them actually do change some of the modifications that had been published previously, I think, and we'll deal with those as we go through. In terms of subsequent action points from this week and next, I will do a similar note to I have done previously. I'll probably do a note at the end of this week and then a note following that. We do have some reserve days for not, what date is now? Is it the 26th, 27th, 28th of June, which I'll say something more about probably tomorrow, actually. I think it probably will use at least one of those reserve days, but I'll come back with that and explain that either later today or tomorrow, just so we can sort of get that arranged. Right, I'll go around the table in a minute, but just one before we do, actually, I just wanted to check one thing that's going to be we're discussing tomorrow. It's about the housing numbers and the council's response to my supplementary question 711, which was about the 5-year supply. I'm not going to discuss that today, but it's just a factual clarification, actually, just to make sure I'm clear. The response, it does what I asked it to do. It sets out the sites that the council are gazing into the future that I think will be available from the 5 years from 2026. And it seems to reflect the schedule, the trajectory that had previously been published in exam 22. Yep. The one exception to that, unless I'm misreading something, seems to be Northeast Thatcher, where the trajectory previously published, I think, had a figure of 320 from the 5 years from the 1st of April 2026, whereas the response includes a figure of 480. So I think either I'm made a mistake or you made a mistake. We just, you check it and just get back to me. The reason I raise it now is just so we can get it sorted out before tomorrow. It may be that I'm misreading the columns or something, but just leave it for now, and then we'll maybe just pick it up at the end of this morning or whatever. Okay. Well, I'll go around the table and ask people to introduce themselves, and then I'll see if there's any procedural queries before we move on to the first agenda item. So if I could start with the council, please.
Morning, sir. Emmeline Lambert, Council, West Berkshire.
Vivian Cole, West Berkshire Council.
Paula Amarelli, West Berkshire Council.
Liz Allen, EPLA for West Berkshire Council.
Lila Bassett, West Berkshire Council.
Paul Goddard, West Berkshire Council, Highways.
Morning, sir. Mike Bodkin, Town, on behalf of Pinson's Lane.
Morning, David Wilson, Thames Water.
David Cowan, Cheveley Parish Council. Sir, if you have no further opening comments that relate to the AONB sites this afternoon, or indeed if the council's opening comments don't relate to this afternoon's sessions, I would propose to retire now and return at 2 o'clock.
Absolutely fine. I don't think there's anything of general interest now or of specific interest to the AONB. So yes, that's fine. And as I said, we won't start before 2 o'clock. So if you want to have a break and come back at that time, we'll deal with the AONB sites. Thank you.
Yes, I'm representing AWE Aldermaston and AWE Burfield Residents Action Group.
Yes, good morning, sir. Douglas Bond from Wolf Bond Planning, representing the owners of RSA 13 at Woolhampton. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. My name is Peter Canavan from Carter Jonas. I'm a partner at Carter Jonas, and I am representing the trustees of the Frank Wallace Estate.
Morning, sir. My name is Michael Cole, Bell Cornwell, representing Central Corporation Projects, RSA 10.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the first item on the revised agenda, I think it was, were, well, the first three, some council responses to some action points previously, and they were relevant to the geographical area that we're talking about today. So I'll pick up on those if I could. First of all, the response to AP 28 was just ask the council to check again the sort of a consistent approach to housing numbers for allocations in the plan based on the comprehensive information that was available at the 1st of April 2023. Because I think the modifications that proposed previously had taken account of some subsequent information which wasn't comprehensive across the district. It was up to date, but it was moving things on. So you recheck those, and I think you've suggested that some of the previously proposed modifications you would not propose anymore, and you'll just stick to the information and the position as at 1st of April 2023.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and some of those are sites we're going to talk about this morning and this afternoon, but it doesn't actually change the council's position. It's just a sort of, it's where we're presenting the figures and which columns they go in, really. It makes the difference. So it just tidies things up from my point of view. So that's fine. In terms of this response to AP 29, that related back to an exercise that I'd asked you to do following the first week, which was about checking the suitability of all of the sites identified in the housing and employment land availability assessment that had been done, because there'd been some points made in week one that there were some areas within the sites that had been previously assessed that when looked at individually, they thought, and based on subsequent evidence as well, submitted at Reg 19 stage, they were arguing were suitable. And I think the council's position to start with was everything that was suitable had been allocated in the plan, but actually you were accepting that actually things had probably moved on a bit on some. So that was a helpful exercise you went through, and you provided a list of 5 sites that the council now says are actually suitable, and some were available, known to be available, others I think you were checking. So that's fine. But the action point 29 just asked you to provide a bit more information about the reasons why you'd chosen those and reassessed all the others. And in response to AP 29, you've included a long list of all the sites you've reassessed, and you've explained in a column, summarised the reasons why your assessments are as they are. And it doesn't change anything that you previously proposed. So the 5 are now suitable, the others aren't. And for each of those, there's a reason that you've said, explaining whether it's highways or landscape terms or whatever. That's the council's reason for the assessment. Okay, so we won't talk about what's on that list now. We will talk about the 2 sites that you say are suitable, which are Pan 8 this afternoon and Till 13, which we'll talk about this morning. The others are still omission sites, but people do have an opportunity, if they're here with an interest in those, to talk about the general approach to that, if they've got any sort of concerns about the way that would have been assessed. But as I've said previously, it's not my role at this stage, at least, to go into the detail of looking at all the potential omission sites and thinking about what could or should have been allocated in the plan and what hasn't. It's the first job for me to look at is what is in the plan, decide if that is sound, and if not, what potential courses of action would be open for the council to address that. So I won't say any more about that now. We'll see what people have got to say as we go through the day. So that deals with those 2. Is there any questions or points people wish to make about those 2 things that I've just said? No, in which case we'll deal just now with a sort of contextual point for the Eastern Urban area, which again arose from, I think, week 1, which was about the policy SP1 and what it says about the Eastern Urban area. And the council's proposed a modification, which basically it uses a similar phrase, I think, to the urban areas in other parts of the district, to basically talk about it being a focus for housing development and saying that's through existing commitments, allocated sites, and basically development within the existing built-up area, which that phrase is then defined by the settlement boundary, which we're also going to talk about later. So that's basically position for SP1, yeah. Any points that I think this arose from your suggestions in week 1? Anything you wish to say about that?
Yes, sir. I mean, I'm grateful that the council recognised this issue, but we would argue that reference to sites immediately adjacent to the urban area, the settlement boundary, where appropriate, would help to strengthen the policy.
Yeah, okay, understood. I mean, presumably the logic of that would apply. If you were saying that about the eastern area, would that same approach then have to apply across the district to all settlement boundaries, or is it particularly somewhere the hierarchy in the settlements?
I think given the importance of the eastern urban area and the proximity to Reading in particular, I do think a special case can be made, which would not necessitate changes being made across the whole of the district.
Okay, so it would be specific to the eastern urban area. Okay, understood. And it would be, so if that approach were taken, it would be subject to other policies in the plan relating to the AWEs and flood risk and all those things anyway. So it would be, yeah. Okay, well, I'll see. Yeah, okay, understood. Do you want to just respond on that? I suspect you might have a different perspective on it.
Thank you, sir. I've noticed when reviewing other local plans that there has been a tendency for, I can think of 2 examples. One is the Ashford local plan in Kent and the County Durham plan, obviously in Durham, where there is a policy that is district-wide that does allow flexibility in the provision of housing, which we all understand to be a significantly important issue, where subject to criteria being met, sites can be supported on the outer edge of defined settlement boundaries, even though they may not be allocated. And whether that's the point that the colleague opposite me is making, that's something that has some pedigree in other local plans for that added flexibility in delivery of much needed housing.
Yeah, understood. Well, we're in danger of retreading over ground that we covered in week one, which was to do with the strategic approach and the various policies relating to settlements and settlement boundaries, etc. But understand the point. And obviously, just because such an approach is found sound in one plan, it doesn't mean it has to be in every plan. But I understand the point, and I think, as you may have alluded to there, I'm familiar with the Durham plan because I did examine that plan. So I know so it was a good example to pick. So I'm aware of the background. I can't remember if it was something that was in the submitted plan or something that was modified to increase the flexibility. But either way, it can be a sound approach in certain circumstances. AWE residents group. Could you put the microphone on, please? Or is it not working? Oh, yeah.
Yes, I concur that that approach should actually be considered as district-wide because of the substantial constraints that we have in the eastern area of West Berkshire, as you've mentioned, the AWEs. So, there is a need for development, but we need to be flexible with regard to where we place that development and not compromise the public safety of citizens that are living in and around the AWE sites. Thank you.
Understood. The approach to the AWEs and the policy and the plan relating to that, you'll be aware of, was subject to some further work, and there was a modification to the policy SP4 published whenever it was recently, in the last day or two. So you'll be aware of that, and I think that is on an agenda for a subsequent hearing session. It's not for today. It is, I think, next week, one of the days. So make sure that check the agendas if you're not aware already when that is, and we're going to discuss that revised policy then. Okay. Right. Anything the council wish to say on the eastern urban area and what you've heard about that? You don't need to go back over the approach to edge of settlement, but the eastern urban area, it's basically adopting the same approach as it is for the other urban areas. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right, which brings me on to what was the original list of issues to talk about under this part of matter 6, which were the non-strategic housing allocations in the eastern area. Now, I have to say, I don't have many questions about these, but I will go through each one in turn and see if the council or anyone else has got anything they wish to say. And then there are a couple of other agenda items that we do need to deal with. So quite a few of these sites, I think, are either got permission or are under development. So they are pretty much committed. So the first one is the RSA 6 at Tilehurst, which is for a care home. And that development started in 2022. This is one of the ones where I think when you looked at it on site visits earlier this year, it was largely completed. And so the rationale was, well, it doesn't need to be an allocation anymore. But by using the common information available at the 1st of April 2023, I think you've said, well, okay, at that point, an allocation is still a sensible thing
That's
to
correct.
propose. Yeah. Okay. Right, thank you. That's clear enough. Obviously, if we go on with this examination long enough, we can roll forward the base date to 2024 and 2025, and we can go on forever if we really want. But there has to come a point, I think, when we draw a line. And that's where I've drawn it at the moment, and hopefully it can stay there. Any points anybody else wish to make about RSA 6? No, okay. RSA 7 is at Purley Rise, 35 dwellings. Again, this site is under development. It started last year, and at the 31st of March 2023, it would still be seen as an allocation rather than a committed or a finished site. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Any other queries, points about that one? No. RSA 8, Bath Road, Dorking at Calcott, 35 dwellings. This is one which is now owned by a developer and is subject to an application submitted last year. But it hasn't got permission yet, I don't think, or it hadn't when, no.
Yeah, our understanding is the application is waiting for section 106 to be signed off shortly. And then the estimated timescale is like June.
Okay, so, but at the moment, your assessment doesn't assume any contribution to the 5-year supply from the 1st of April 2023,
That's correct.
but it may be one of the ones that come into
Yeah,
the crystal ball gazing that we'll be doing tomorrow. Okay, thank you. And there's a modification to Part D. It was agreed with Thames Water, I think, on this one. Okay, I'll move on to RSA 9. This has now got reserved matters approved in October 2023 and development started this year. And 104 dwellings expected to be completed by the end of March 2027. Is that right?
that's correct.
So that's included in the 5-year supply from 2023 onward.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. But again, that's an allocation. Any questions? Anything else you want to say about that one? Any questions from anyone else? No. RSA 10, White Hart Meadow Field. This is one of 2 sites adjoining each other, I think, isn't it? Yeah, okay. So this one is owned by a housing developer, I understand. Looking at Bell Cornwall.
It's the landowners, they're not developers themselves.
Right, it's landowner. Okay, yeah, okay. But no application is submitted yet. No completions are assumed in the 5-year period from 2023. That's correct.
That's correct.
And your assessment of capacity is 40 during the plan period. I can't remember exactly when, but we'll deal with that. However, this seems to be the main point of disagreement about the capacity for this particular site. Just explain, just before I go on to that, just the relationship between the two. I understand that this adjoins the RSA 11, doesn't it? The former sewage treatment works.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the map in the plan indicates a link between them, but it's just a walking and cycling link. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So the 2 sites would be developed separately in terms of highways access.
Correct.
And there's no, other than this pedestrian cycle link between the 2, there's no need for any sort of overall site, site planning, comprehensive development or any of that nature.
No.
No, okay. So it's fair enough to look at this RSA 10 in isolation in terms of its capacity and whatever the requirements are set out in there. So just before I go to Bell Cornwall, just your assessment, just explain what the assessment of capacity is. I think where sites haven't got permission, you've taken a fairly standard approach based on some sort of landscape assessment capacity and density assumptions. Is that correct?
So the starting point is
Can you just put your microphone up a little bit?
sorry.
Yeah.
So our calculation, the starting point is the gross site area. And then we apply a percentage of developable area. It's according with the pattern book approach. And also a standard density has been used. But in some cases, the gross site area will reduce to take into account of physical or landscape issues that would limit the development of the whole site. For example, in this site is the need to minimize the impact of the landscape character. So it will further reduce the developable area and capacity of the site.
This is one where you've not taken the standard approach, you've reduced the developable area by a greater amount, is that correct?
So it's the standard approach across all the sites.
Okay.
But in some cases, there will be some reduction because the site is like the area is not undevelopable. So we will reduce that amount and then still apply the percentage and density to come up with the capacity of the site.
Okay, so which part of this site is not considered developable? And for what reason? If I'm looking at the only map I've got before me, I know that Ben Cornwall have got a master plan prepared, but in terms of the council's assessment, I'm looking at this plan in this map here. Which part of the site is not considered developable?
So it's the area beyond the northeast of the power line. And then,
So that's where the red line is drawn,
yes, correct.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
within the red line,
Oh,
so
yeah,
your position is that the beyond the power line is not developable.
yeah, and then,
Within the red line that's on here, what's the gross area of the red line then?
so do you want like the site area? So 1.9 hectare,
So that's the red line area.
that's the red line
Okay.
area.
And you applied your normal density approach
Yes,
to
it's
that.
75%.
So that's 75%, and that's what you do because you assume because the public open space provision and landscaping and whatever else, yeah?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct.
So then that leaves the whatever it was 3/4 of 1.9 is
So 30 dwellings per hectare for the density.
so then 30 dwellings per hectare. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, and that's an indicative. I can't remember exactly where it's explained in the plan, but these are only intended to be. Sorry, do you want to just clarify anything?
so in the policy, we require a setback from Selwyn Brook. So in the policy, we
Yeah.
require a setback from Selwyn Brook, which will slightly reduce the developable area.
Okay, so which part of the policies are we looking at here? What letters?
Okay. So buffer of at least 10 meters from Selwyn Brook. But that's included in the red line boundary.
Yeah, okay. So that might bring the developable area down below 75%.
Sorry.
Does that bring the developable area down below the 75% potentially? Because you said before
Yeah.
it's a standard approach.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's correct.
right, okay, thank you.
And the Blossom 2 as well. No development will be permitted within Blossom 2, but that's not excluded. Yeah, sorry, that's,
Okay.
yeah.
So from your point of view, you're satisfied that the policy requirements in here are justified and they're necessary and that leads you to an assumption that 40 can be accommodated, but that isn't a limit, presumably.
So we said approximately
Yes.
40 dwellings.
Yeah.
Not up to 40
No,
dwellings.
okay, so
No.
it's approximately 40. So, but is there anything in the plan that would lead the council to sort of say in principle, 72, for example, would be unacceptable if it could meet all of these criteria and other policies in the plan? What would the council's position be? Does it matter to me, I suppose, is the question. Would the council's position be that it would have to refuse permission for 72, for example, because it was so much greater than 40? Or would the council say, well, no, because everything can be achieved that we wanted to achieve, that's a good, efficient use of land and therefore we'll grant permission? Where does the...
So we think it's really the developable area and site density that will direct the site capacity.
So do I need to go back to SP1? What does it say about these densities? Are they limits? Or is it all about? So what policy SP1 says, a net density of at least 30. Higher densities, certain places. Okay, I think, well, yeah, oh, sorry.
I think the policy is clear that we would require low density on this. The policy is clear that we would require low density development on the site,
Okay,
and that would be in accordance with SP1.
okay, so, yeah, okay, so this specifically here, it's talking about a low density scheme. And, oh, okay. So I think is what you're saying to me, you don't think that it's likely that permission would be granted for a scheme of, say, 70 odd?
I don't think you could say never,
Yeah.
of course, but if the wording of the policy is approximately 40, in my submission, 72 wouldn't be approximately 40. And what's happened on this particular policy is that it's been informed by the landscape sensitivity and capacity assessment. So, for example, not only does it say a low density scheme, but it also says in B2 that development's limited to 2 stories in height, for example. So therefore, taking all that into account, the council's assessment is that approximately 40 is what's suitable on this site.
Yeah, that's fine for the purposes of me thinking about, you know, the land supply. I suppose what I'm trying to get to is, if you could achieve everything that the policy is seeking to achieve, including the setback from the brook, and you don't go beyond the pylons, which are outside the red line anyway, but the only thing that it wasn't was low density, would it matter? I suppose.
It would be unlikely. It would be unlikely that if it wasn't low density, it would comply with the landscape policies.
Okay, no, thank you. I think it's as clear as it can be. And so let's go over to where the capacity for 72 comes from and whether there's anything more fundamentally different about.
Thank you, Inspector. I think there's 2 matters here in terms of the current site allocation proposed by the local authority. As they originally, it was 100 in the Reg 18, which got reduced following a landscape assessment that they undertook.
And was that on the basis of a different red line?
Correct. That was on a different red line. During correspondence throughout this emerging plan, the council, through a landscape impact assessment, had reduced the line that you see now. That was based, that's you can see in a written submission, so that we've done our own LVIA in that regard. I think that we're accepting that anything east of the pylon it could remain open. I think our large debate in terms of site area sits to the land south of the current allocation that the council are seeking. That's another area that they've omitted from the original submission during the Reg 18. So this is north of the High Street, I think the road between there and the allocation.
Sorry, I've lost you. The red line that is in the plan,
yeah,
is different from Reg 18.
Yeah.
But the bit that goes beyond the pylons further to the east, you don't disagree with?
Don't disagree further to the east of the pylons, but further south the allocation between north of High Street Road, essentially. The council in their landscape impact noted that that wasn't a developable area.
Yeah. And
that's the area we disagree, and we feel that the 72 alongside the council's area of 1.8, we calculate the area should be 3.17 of developable area, and that's where we get the 72 at the local authorities calculations or density.
Okay, so there would be a larger red line.
Pardon?
The red line would encompass a larger area for your site.
Yeah,
as you're suggesting. Okay.
Yes, we're proposing a larger developable area. The council, and that's where we get
not within the red line, but extending the site.
It's in our submissions in appendix.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I can check.
So we set out there what the developable area is, and then I think it comes back again to the policy in terms of the approximate 40. In our view, that's a minimum, a starting point. As you say, density and matters of design should be left at the point of the planning application process, not the policy.
Okay. If the red line was where it is, you wouldn't necessarily disagree with 40 being based on the way they've gone about it.
That's where they've gone about in terms of 30 dph, 75.
But your argument would be, well, if we could come up with a scheme within that red line.
We understand the constraints on the site, but it's a matter of design at that point in time.
But to get up to the 72, you're saying the
larger site.
Yeah, larger site. Okay, no, thanks for clarifying. Could you just comment on that then, about the why this area that's been referred to there has been excluded from the site?
Liz Allen speaking. That was excluded from the site after an extensive landscape sensitivity and capacity assessment, which based on West Berk's local landscape character area 2019, sets out important criteria, what's valued features within that area. One of the valued features is the historic village of Thiel, and to maintain its setting and separation from Calcott and Reading, it was proposed to keep a wide swathe open. So that the southern area of RSA 10 forms part of that.
Say that the southern area of RSA 10, you mean the bit that's not included in RSA 10, the bit that they would like to include?
That's correct.
Yeah, so you've looked at it again, you've looked at the landscape assessment that they provided,
Yes.
and you still have the view that the red line's in the right place and that bit does need to be kept
Correct.
open. Okay, well, I can look at both. Sorry, do you want to just?
Yeah, just a few final comments, just in terms of that assessment, say Natural England and the AONB board at the time, they referenced the power lines as being the natural break, not necessarily the land immediately adjacent to Thiel. So that's where this disagreement lies. So we feel it should be included.
Okay, thank you. Right, I can, have another look at all of that and see, but obviously the starting point is, well, is what the council's done sound, and if not, does it need to be looked at again? So thank you for that, and I think that's clear enough about where the main area of disagreement is on that one. Anything else on that particular site that anyone else wishes to say? Which brings me on to the adjoining land. This is again, this is the former sewage treatment works. This adjoins the site we've just looked at further to the north, isn't it? And again, it's defined, its eastern boundary is defined by the power line, and this is assessed in landscape terms as being suitable brownfield site. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
And this doesn't have any. It is owned by a developer, I think you say, but it's not got a planning application, or it hadn't in 2023. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Thames Water, you've suggested a modification to this. Is this to clarify? Do you want to just explain what that is? This is part I about, again, it's but this which bits to remain undeveloped and which isn't, I think.
Yeah, thank you, David Wilson, Thames Water. So our case was similar to RSA 10. In the Reg 18, the former sewage treatment works site was allocated for 70, and it had a larger site boundary, including the whole site of the former sewage treatment works. But in the Reg 19, the red line site boundary was reduced and the site allocation was reduced to 60. We totally support the allocation. So we're not currently promoting a larger housing number on the site, but we think it makes eminent sense to include the whole sewage treatment works site, because the area to the east of the pylon could naturally be used for open space and biodiversity net gain. So we've suggested amendments to the wording to include that area within the allocation, but to say that that area wouldn't be used for development of housing, but could be used for associated open space and B&G.
Okay, so your point is not that the capacity should be different than 60. It's just that the red line should be extended to include the whole of the ownership or the former sewage treatment works. And
that's right. Although there is an extensive planning history on the site, there was a previous outline application when the site was being considered before. That was for a larger number. So we think the site does have a larger capacity, but in light of the landscape assessment, we're accepting 60. Yep.
Okay, I'll go to see what the council, in terms of the red line, it would, yeah, do you want to just explain what, I mean, it's drawn because you wanted to define the developable area rather than the land ownership or the former use, is that correct?
That's correct.
But it's part of a scheme included, well, what would happen to the bit of the sewage treatment works that's not in the red line then, if the planning application just excluded it, would it not?
So we think if the site area beyond the red line is a bonus really, if like open space for offsite BNG requirement or open space, but it's the policy requirements just makes it clear it is a developable area, so we draw the red line like this.
It's odd, isn't it? Because other allocations have got red lines and they've got big areas within them that are not developable and they're like hashed as open space or something. But this seems to be a different approach, doesn't it? This is like you've drawn the red line and you might actually be looking for something outside the red line. I don't know which is a clearer approach.
We'd still be looking for open space, the normal requirements within the red line.
So the numerical open space requirement for DM, whatever it is, you'd look for within the red line.
It's included within that original calculations
For the number. Yeah, understood.
So it can come out of there.
Yeah, okay. But what about, is there a bit of former sewage treatment works that's going to get left out by the fact that you've not included it in the red line and designated it as something to be landscaped, for example, like you have done with other allocations?
Council doesn't consider that area necessary if for the purposes of this policy, if further open space is required or further landscaping is required, or there's an assessment of BNG, which means that that area of land would be required for offsite BNG, then the council would look at that. But for the moment, the red line area can include all of that in the council's assessment.
Right. So just because it's former sewage treatment works and it's owned by the same person, company, that doesn't necessitate bringing it into the red line. The red line's fine. You can deliver everything you want and there isn't a need to extend it. Okay. Right, understood. Anything further Thames Water want to say on that? Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments on RSA 11? Yeah, Town.
Just to note, sir, the points we made in matter 1 relating to flood risk, and it is asserted that that part of the site lies within flood zone 2, and it's asserted that the numbers can be delivered within in areas that aren't or the developable area can be kept outside of that flood zone, but I'm not sure whether that meets, strictly speaking, the correct tests of the sequential test when there are other sites available in the eastern area which are free of flooding and other constraints.
Okay, but I think when the council clarified when we had this discussion that yes, the red line includes some flood zone 2, but the layout can be achieve no houses on that site. So in that sense, the sequential approach has been applied.
The council asserted that, sir, but I haven't seen the evidence to that effect.
Okay. Thames Water?
Yeah, I just add that the flood risk area is the area that's been omitted from the site. It's the area to sort of the east of the pylons, which is why it was never shown for any development in the first place in all the master planning work that we've done, and was shown for open space and BNG. And also add in a sequential approach. This is a brownfield site, and so should obviously be considered ahead of greenfield sites.
Okay, so yeah, okay, understood. I mean, there is a flood risk assessment that's been done, and there are areas mapped, aren't there? So I can look if I need to see where the flood zone 2 is in relation to this red line.
Okay, yep.
Yeah. Okay, right, understood. Thank you. Anything else on RSA 11? Thames Water, your signs up. No, you finished on that one. Okay. Pond House Farm, then Burfield Common. I think this is development started in 2023. It wasn't advanced stage in February 2024, but going back to the base date, it's still in as an allocation.
Correct.
So that's fine. Is it, I mean, presumably AWE make the point though that, well, yes, they accept that the permission's been implemented. They say when they wrote the statement, it may not be completed. It may have been completed now, so this is academic. But they're saying that actually it shouldn't be shown as an allocation anyway, because yes, it's a commitment and you can count it as a commitment, but if that permission weren't to be implemented or lapsed or it wasn't completed, the plan shouldn't be encouraging that development now because of the DEPZ. But I suppose your point is, well, the off-site emergency plan took account of that commitment and therefore it's been factored in, and therefore even if that permission were to be not implemented or it was changed, so long as it was still the same number, you'd be content in terms of safety as well as housing supply.
Yeah, that's correct.
Well, AWE aren't here. AWE residents group are here. Is there anything you want to say about this site or?
Yes, please, if I may. I would
Could you
like
just put
to-
your microphone a little bit
Oh, yeah.
lower? That's it.
I have a few points, if I may. I don't know if you want to start off with the DEPZ, or we
Well-
could cover that next week.
Yeah, no, I'm going to deal with that next week. It's just simply about this allocation. I mean, the
Oh,
fact is,
okay, yes, yes, I have a few points.
not, I mean, whatever the background and the history is, it's not really of great interest to me, with all respect, because
Okay.
if it's committed and there's not much I can do about it. But anything you want to say, bearing that in mind?
Yeah, there are a few points. Obviously you've asked the council to carry out a further, say, sustainability appraisal of the sites, AP2. And I'd like to refer you to page 60 of that, which is obviously the Pont House Copse development. And point 5, page 65A, it states to conserve and enhance the biodiversity, geodiversity of West Berks. And it states that the site is adjacent to a biodiversity opportunity area. And then it goes on to talk about Omer's Gully would need to be protected, as with the adjacent woodland. There is no Omer's Gully within this area. This is an error, and this has been an error since the site was first identified back in, was it 2016, 2018? This has been highlighted, but this still continues to be reflected in the latest version of the SA and SEA. So the statement is not accurate and it needs to be very explicit. Furthermore, the map in relation to Pont House Farm, it does not accurately reflect the location of the ancient woodland, which is Pont House Copse. It's actually a very old map and therefore it's compromising the integrity of the woodland.
Sorry, the map you're referring to is the one that's in the plan, yeah?
Yes.
So it's got a hatched area that shows ancient woodland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is based on an old model predating 2019. Natural England carried out an assessment of the woodland area as a consequence of West Berkshire not commissioning a landscape sensitivity assessment. And they identified that there was ancient woodland. They revised the ancient woodland extent of Pont House Copse, and it was increased extensively. That has not been reflected in the local plan. Therefore, the assessment have been based on incorrect information, whereas the ancient woodland is actually closer to the red line area, which you will see within the assessment.
Okay. Okay, understood. Thank you.
Yes, can I mention a couple of other things?
Yes, although please bear in mind this, you're not disputing the site's under development. The permission's being implemented.
The site, I am disputing the site in its entirety, because it's within the zone, but also because of the way the site has been designed. So it was very specifically identified that there had to be a substantial buffer to the ancient woodland. That hasn't happened because they've been basing their assessment on the old map.
Yeah, understood.
Equally, Natural England also identified that because of the gradient of the land, it's basically a gully woodland area. So the land slopes down into the woodland. So there is an identified need for SUDs, so attenuation ponds. Natural England, again, back in 2018, and this was subsequently affirmed by the specialist officers within West Berkshire Council within the last year and a half in 2022, that the attenuation ponds, the SUDs, needed to be located outside of the woodland buffer. So therefore that impacts the red line area where one could develop, but the BN biodiversity net gain needs to factor in both the incorrect location of the ancient woodland and the addition of the SUDs, which need to be outside of the buffer within the woodland.
But these are all matters that either should have been or have been addressed in the planning application and the development that's now underway.
They haven't been addressed.
No, but do you understand that?
Yeah.
That I can understand the concerns you have, but you're not disputing that the site, the development's underway.
The development commenced on May the 30th last year. It's not complete. There's about 8 complete houses. None of them have been sold, and that's its current status.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And then we will get into the conversation about the DEPSED and the emergency plan next week.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything you want to say from the council point of view? No. But the fact of the matter is that planning permission has been implemented and can be completed.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Sorry, can I just make one more point, if I may? And the other thing is in relation to Burfield, the Environment Agency identified Burfield as a high spiller, and they basically opposed the development because of the sewerage issues that are being experienced within the area. In the last 2 years, Pond House, Copse Woodland, including houses in and around the area, have experienced sewerage spillages, both within the woodland, which are illegal, and also on streets and around people's gardens. So it's very serious. And this has been going on for many years, and only quite recently has information come to light as to the full extent of sewerage issues within Burfield. And the sewerage run infrastructure is connected into the woodland Pond House Copse. So we have a further exacerbated issue, and there's big questions around sustainability because we have evidence, recent evidence of sewage going into the woodland, but also we will now have a further load, potentially if this is built out and occupied, of 100 units, residential units, which will further load onto what is a failing sewage infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on because I think there's a limit to what I can say or do about this site, given its advanced stage of development. So finally, I think brings us on to RSA 13, which is Woolhampton. An outline application for 16 was submitted in March 2023. This is the one where there's some detailed comments, I think, from Wolf Bond about the some of the criteria. Do you want to, rather than me sort of go through those? This is about landscape, 800-metre distance from the sewage treatment works and the minerals extraction requirements. So do you want to just quickly run through those and I'll get the council to respond?
Thank you, sir. Well,
Yeah.
I'm here for 2 reasons. One is in relation to your first question about reasonable prospects. So if I could just very briefly address you on that first, sir. As you've already pointed out, there is an application that's currently before the council, was submitted in last year. That was going to the planning committee in March of this year, and that received a published committee report recommending the application for approval. That application, that committee item was deferred until the outcome of the EIP had taken place. But that committee report confirmed that all relevant matters relating to the quantum of development that marries up with the 16 that's included in the draft local plan, the mix, the affordable housing, landscape visual impact, residential amenities, the highway access and sustainability considerations, flooding and drainage, ecology, all those matters were accepted from a technical perspective such that you should have every faith that the site is indeed an appropriate one and, using the terminology, has a reasonable prospect of coming forward. And it is in the ownership of a developer too. So that's the first point. The second point then relates to the parameters of the policy. And specifically in relation to two matters. One, the requirement for a minerals assessment. And bearing in mind the issues of soundness, is that assessment justified on such a small site? And bearing in mind that's surrounded by existing residential development, there's a need for a buffer to a pipeline, there's a need for a buffer for the ancient woodland. Frankly, there isn't much left for any minerals. So whether that is the assessment, but equally, if that is indeed not the assessment, one queries whether that is indeed justified. I could look at the Minerals and Waste Local Plan Policy 9, and that also refers to which is obviously part of the development plan, and that policy says if it's needed for other requirements, such as housing, which clearly it is, that avoids the need for an assessment consistent with that actual policy. So again, that's a question mark whether there's a need for it to be one of the parameters. The second point relates to an odour assessment. The current application before the council, which I repeat is recommended for approval, didn't require an assessment. Secondly, there is no explanation as to the 800-metre catchment area. So that goes to the point of justification in terms of soundness. Thirdly, it's the inquiry or examination document WAT1C, which I refer to in my representations. The site is located to the northwest of the waste, get the acronym right, waste transfer site. Clearly, the prevailing wind is from the southwest. Contrary to the table of assessment that suggests that there is not an urban area between the site and the treatment work site, you'll actually find that there is indeed. Midgham and the railway station line between the allocation site and that waste water site, such that, as the table suggests, if there is any odour, that would already be known and reported, and therefore those sites where there's an intervening urban area attracts a low risk. I repeat, there was no objection from the environmental health officer to the two applications that have been submitted on this site. So again, I question the justification for that parameter, neither of which, though, goes to the heart of the appropriateness of the site for immediate development.
Okay, thank you, understood. AWE residents, do you want to comment on this site?
Yes. Well, essentially, again, we're in the zones. So whilst the site is not within the DEP set, it is very clearly within the zones. And as we've just discussed, it's important that public safety is prioritised over and above building of houses in what is a very sensitive zone. And we need to protect both of our AWEs for the future of our country.
So this is not in the DEPZ, it's in the 5 kilometre outer zone, is it? Yeah, okay. So there's a different policy approach. We'll talk about the policy approach in the revised or the modified policy SP4, I think it is, next week. But but this is not within the DEPZ, and therefore,
Correct.
and the consultation arrangements for the 5 kilometre zone we've talked about for certain scales of development that may trigger certain things, but understood. Yeah.
Just for my own peace of mind, so you'll be aware that, again, the AWE were consulted on the planning application and raised no objection to the 16 units because, one, we're in the outer zone, and the threshold for an objection in that outer zone is 200 dwellings, to which we are clearly a long way south of. Thank you.
We'll talk about what the thresholds or what the triggers for objection are next week, but understood that there's a difference between the DEPZ and the, anyway. Okay, sorry, the council, do you want to come back on the detail points about the, well, basically the 2 requirements in this policy for a minerals assessment and an odour assessment are not justified, and that's been evidenced by the committee report for an application that's been submitted.
Yeah, so as far as the minerals assessment is concerned, I understand that the information that we prepared the policy for has been updated, and actually now the area doesn't, it's shown that actually there aren't mineral deposits there. So the council would be happy to propose a modification to remove criterion K.
The odour assessment wasn't deemed necessary for the planning application.
So as part of the work on the HELA, the environmental health team advised that an odour assessment would be required. And that was also identified within the water cycle study. But maybe if we go back and clarify with our environmental health colleagues just regarding the application to see whether that criteria is still necessary.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll, Thames Water.
Yeah, can I just clarify, was this a sewage treatment works you need an odour assessment for? Because I think you referred to it as a waste transfer station.
I think it was a wastewater treatment works. Yeah, so it did a Thames Water infrastructure, I guess.
Okay, well, we promoted an amendment to the policy in the local plan to cover off odour issues in relation to any development near to a sewage treatment work to protect the amenity of new residents. So that's why the policy is being amended to sort of require odour impact assessments for developments within the vicinity of sewage treatment works, wastewater treatment works.
Yes, but is that when you say you've got there's a general policy in the plan, I think
Yes.
you're talking about, yeah. You're not saying anything about this particular site.
No, I don't know the details.
No, okay, fine, thanks. But you're saying that it would be picked up anyway by a generic policy.
Yeah.
Which we'll probably talk about next week, I imagine, if we need to. Okay, thank you. Well, I think I'll note that the council's prepared to consider those, but right here, thank you. Anything else on that allocation, or indeed any of the, before we finish on the non-strategic allocations in the eastern area? Any final points about any of those? No, okay. Right. What we'll do then is deal with the last 2 matters on the agenda, which both relate to this part of the district, hence me putting them on this agenda, which is about the settlement boundary for Tilehurst, in particular the retail park north of the M4 junction 12, and then sort of linked to that, the council's reassessment of the HELA sites, in particular Till 13 at Pinson's Lane. So can we look at the settlement boundary first? The council say this was an on-balance judgment. It used the criteria. It took account of the views of the parish council. You could, moving in one direction, you may get a certain perception, moving in another direction, you get a different perception. And you're saying that you could quite logically include it in the settlement boundary. The retail park, it clearly is a established part of, urban fabric, whether it's within Tilehurst or not, I suppose that's the judgment the council took a view about and is prepared to reconsider based on. Yeah, okay, well, I can't remember exactly what you said. Are you proposing to change the boundary, or are you suggesting that you're quite happy to if I think it needs to be done?
If you felt it appropriate, we'd be happy to change the boundary, yes.
Okay, well, before I'll think about that, that's fine. But let's have a think about if the boundary were to be changed, I suppose, and you've also done this reassessment of this till 13 area of land, are there any kind of linked issues here about where you would draw logically? If you were to draw a line around the retail park, would that logically fit with where the boundary is in this area now? I've had a look at it on the map. It's obviously tight around what appears to be mainly residential areas, and then the A4, I think it is, isn't it? To draw the boundary. If you were to withdraw it, where would the boundary then be now?
So if you were to draw it, including the retail park and then the associated development towards the A4, you'd basically go you'd go round the back of IKEA and then up where the built development is, and then you would actually probably include the recreation ground, which is in between the which is adjacent to the existing proposed boundary.
Okay, so it wouldn't naturally draw in till 13, but till
No.
13 would then be
It would be adjacent.
it's already adjacent to part of the settlement boundary, but it would be adjacent to a larger part, leaving just the sort of northwest bit that would not be.
That's right.
Okay,
Yes.
but it wouldn't necessitate bringing in till 13.
No.
But that said, it's a site that the council has deemed to be now suitable and available.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Okay, understood. I can have a think about that. And in terms of the reassessment of till 13, essentially, I think it was on the change of evidence or the change of assessment in terms of highways impact. You're satisfied from Highway Authority that that land could be developed without severe impacts. Yeah,
Yes, I'm satisfied. Thank you.
that's clear enough. Right. Yes, town.
So thank you for the opportunity to raise this. And clearly I recognise that this isn't a Section 78 inquiry, and I in that respect, I'm not going over old ground. However, the MPPF does not talks very clearly, as you've just asked Mr. Goddard, about severity of impact on the highway network or highway safety concerns. It doesn't mention a kind of general concern as expressed by the council's decision not to allocate the site. There isn't, in fact, there's no reference to the word concern in the MPPF at all, 2021. So I just wonder on what basis this decision can be considered to be sound. It is a matter of fact that we had a strong support to the previous planning application. I won't, as I say, I recognise it isn't a Section 78 inquiry, and we were unavoidably, it wasn't practical to take that application to a Section 78 inquiry for reasons which I obviously won't go into now. However, it is suitable, is recognised as being suitable, achievable, developable. The previous planning application had no technical objections, and we are more than willing to bring the site forward clearly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Understood. I mean, but obviously I'm examining the submitted plan. The submitted plan doesn't include this allocation. There's no national policy requirement for a plan to include every suitable site and allocate it. Obviously, the question is the plan sound? If not, what needs to be changed to make it sound? And obviously, if one of the things that are at issue about the soundness of the plan is, does it identify enough suitable land? Well, that may then prompt other things to be considered. That's all I'll say at this stage. But you've not disputing either, I don't think, that the council could logically draw a settlement boundary that included the retail park and the adjoining recreation ground, but still exclude, well, I suppose you probably don't want to accept this, but using its criteria, it could still logically do that.
Okay, that's absolutely correct. So
Yeah.
yes, it still could, hence my remarks about development immediately adjacent,
Yeah.
opportunities immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary.
And the redrawing of this to reflect the retail park would, in your mind, I suppose, further reinforce the fact that it's well related to the settlement because it's sort of surrounded on 2 or 3 sides by development by the settlement boundary.
Yeah, quite correct. But, you know, as a strategic planner of 35 years experience, I would want to apply a logical, rational planning mind to it, sir. And for that reason, those reasons, I would tend to include it anyway. And, you know, our argument is that there should be more sites made available.
Yeah,
and we'll come back to those points tomorrow, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you. Right, anything further? Anybody else wishes to say about this particular settlement boundary, this site? No, anything else from the council? Right, so that does bring me to the end of this morning's agenda items. So unless there is anything else, we cannot, yes, AWE residents.
It was a point in relation to AP 29. So the council provided an update of this listing, and I'd just like to refer.
Could you put the microphone a bit closer?
Yes, so AP 29.
Yeah.
There are 2 entries, but there are several entries in relation to Burfield, but there are 2 entries that refer to Pond House. So we have SUL 3, which is land at Holly and south of Pond House Farm, Burfield Common, 315 dwellings. Again, there are some, whilst minor, it is very important because of the DEPZ, but that this site isn't south of Pond House Farm, not at all. So you need to revisit, I'd recommend you revisit the wording in relation to that.
Okay, thank you.
And then you have BUR 10, which is correct, east of Clay Hill Road, south of Pond House Farm, which is a proposal of 90 dwellings next to the 100 dwellings that are currently being built that are in the DEPZ. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, any other points people wish to make this morning? No, okay, so we'll break there. We will resume at 2 o'clock. I think there'll be some other participants joining us then. And we're talking then about the non-strategic allocations in the AONB, along with the associated issues that are on the agenda. So thank you for your contributions this morning and enjoy the break.